Imagine a place where 3 generations of your family can be imprisoned for one person's crime, where speaking the wrong words means you vanish into camps that don't officially exist, where a single family has ruled with absolute power for over 70 years, turning an entire nation into the world's most isolated prison. This isn't fiction. This isn't ancient history. This is happening right now, in 2026, just miles from South Korea's gleaming cities. 25 million people live behind walls they cannot cross, speaking words they don't believe, worshiping leaders they cannot question. This is North Korea, and this is its complete, unfiltered story. If you love your country, subscribe. If you love your mother, leave a comment. Asterisk. Before North Korea became the world's most secretive state, the Korean Peninsula was one nation with 5,000 years of shared history. One language, one culture, one people who survived invasions from China, Mongolia, and Japan across countless centuries. But in 1910, Japan annexed Korea, erasing its independence. For 35 brutal years, Koreans lived under occupation. They were forced to take Japanese names, forbidden from speaking their own language in schools, conscripted into Japan's military. Korean women were taken as comfort women for Japanese soldiers. An entire generation grew up knowing only oppression. Then came August 1945. Japan surrendered, ending World War II. Koreans celebrated in the streets, believing freedom had finally arrived after decades of suffering. They were wrong. The United States and Soviet Union, the war's victors, couldn't agree on Korea's future. So they made a decision that would doom millions. They drew a line. The 38th parallel. A temporary administrative border that was supposed to last a few years while Korea transitioned to independence. The Soviets would oversee the North. The Americans would oversee the South. Then both would leave. They never left. In the North, the Soviets needed a Korean leader they could control. They found him in Kim Il-sung, a former guerrilla fighter who had spent years in the Soviet Union and fought against the Japanese in Manchuria. He wasn't the most popular Korean independence leader, but he was loyal to Moscow. Stalin installed him as North Korea's leader in 1948. In the South, the Americans backed Syngman Rhee, a Korean nationalist who had lived in exile. South Korea was officially established in August 1948. 1 month later, North Korea declared itself the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. The word democratic was a lie from day one. 2 Koreas now existed where one nation should have stood. Both leaders claimed to represent all Koreans. Both refused to accept division. Both wanted reunification, but only under their own rule. Families were split overnight. Brothers on opposite sides of an invisible line. Parents separated from children. Lovers torn apart by politics they didn't choose. They believed it was temporary. They believed they'd reunite soon. Kim Il-sung didn't want to wait. With Stalin's approval and Mao Zedong's support, he began planning an invasion. He stockpiled Soviet tanks and weapons. He trained his army in secret. He convinced Stalin that South Korea would collapse in days, that the Americans wouldn't intervene, that Koreans in the South would welcome Northern troops as liberators. He was catastrophically wrong. On June 25, 1950, at 4 in the morning, North Korean troops crossed the 38th parallel. They weren't coming to liberate. They were coming to conquer. Within days, they captured Seoul. The Korean War had begun. What started as a civil war became a proxy battle between superpowers. The United Nations, led by America, sent troops to defend the South. China sent soldiers to support the North. The peninsula became a battlefield for ideologies that weren't even Korean. But how did one man's ambition create the world's most oppressive regime? How did a temporary border become a permanent prison? Stay with us, because what happens next explains everything about the North Korea that exists today. Asterisk. The Korean War lasted 3 years, 1 month, and 2 days. But calling it a war doesn't capture the horror. Cities were bombed into dust. Villages burned. Over 3 million people died, most of them civilians. More bombs were dropped on North Korea than the entire Pacific theater of World War II. The U.S. Air Force ran out of targets and began bombing irrigation dams, deliberately destroying rice fields to starve the population. By 1953, almost every building in North Korea taller than 1 story had been destroyed. Pyongyang was rubble. Families lived in caves. Children knew only hunger and fear. The land was scorched, the people traumatized, the nation broken. When the armistice was signed on July 27, 1953, it wasn't peace. It was a pause. Technically, North and South Korea are still at war today. No peace treaty was ever signed. The 38th parallel became the Korean demilitarized zone, the most heavily armed border on Earth. Families separated by war remained separated. Temporary became permanent. Kim Il-sung emerged from the war not weakened, but more powerful than ever. He controlled the narrative completely. In his version, North Korea had fought heroically against American imperialism. He was the great leader who saved the nation. The war wasn't his fault, it was America's. The suffering wasn't his responsibility, it was caused by foreign enemies. Every failure could be blamed on outside forces. This lie became the foundation of everything that followed. Kim used the destruction to rebuild North Korea exactly as he wanted it. Not as a democracy, not as a communist state equal to the Soviet Union or China, but as something entirely new. A kingdom disguised as a revolution. A monarchy pretending to be socialism. A cult of personality so extreme it would make Stalin look modest. He called it Juche, self-reliance. The idea that North Korea didn't need anyone, that it could survive alone, that the Korean people were special and destined for greatness under his leadership. It sounded like nationalism. It functioned like a religion with Kim as its god. Soviet-style communism had leaders, but those leaders could be replaced. Juche made Kim irreplaceable. He wasn't just a politician. He was the eternal president, the great leader, the son of the nation. To question him wasn't political dissent, it was blasphemy. And blasphemy was punished not just individually, but across 3 generations. This is where the story turns from tragedy to something darker. This is where North Korea stopped being a nation and became a prison. Here's what the world didn't understand about Kim Il-sung in those early years. He wasn't building a country. He was building a trap with no exits. While other communist nations allowed some contact with the outside world, North Korea sealed itself completely. The border with South Korea was already militarized and impassable. But Kim also closed the border with China, North Korea's ally. Travel abroad was forbidden except for elite loyalists. Foreign newspapers were banned. Radio was illegal. Even owning a Bible could mean execution. Why such extreme isolation? Because Kim understood something profound about control. You can't maintain absolute power if people know alternatives exist. If North Koreans could see that South Koreans were prospering, that other communist countries allowed more freedom, that the world didn't worship their leader, the entire system would collapse. So Kim created a reality where North Korea was the center of the universe, where the Kim family weren't just leaders, but semi-divine beings, where every success in North Korea was the greatest in world history, and every problem was caused by evil foreigners plotting against them. Schools taught children that Kim Il-sung had mystical powers, that he could control the weather, that birds sang differently when he walked by, that his birth was foretold by prophets and marked by a double rainbow and a bright star in the sky. Mythology borrowed directly from religious texts and applied to a communist dictator. But here's the truly sinister genius. Kim didn't just rewrite the present. He rewrote history itself. According to official North Korean history, Kim Il-sung personally liberated Korea from Japan. He didn't. Soviet troops did most of the work, and Korean independence was part of Japan's general surrender. According to North Korean textbooks, Kim won the Korean War. He didn't. The war ended in stalemate with the peninsula still divided. According to state propaganda, Kim invented revolutionary military tactics that stunned the world. In reality, his strategy nearly lost the war in the first months. None of that mattered. The truth became whatever Kim said it was. And since no North Korean could access outside information to contradict him, his version of reality became the only reality that existed inside the country. But how do you enforce belief in obvious lies? How do you make people worship someone when they know, deep down, that the worship is absurd? The answer is fear so complete that truth becomes irrelevant. Kim created the Songbun system, a social classification that divided every citizen into loyal, wavering, or hostile classes based on their family's behavior during the Japanese occupation and Korean War. If your grandfather fought for the South, you were hostile class. If your family fled to South Korea during the war, you were hostile class. Hostile class meant you couldn't attend university, couldn't live in cities, couldn't get good jobs, couldn't join the party. Your guilt was genetic. Inherited, permanent, and it worked both ways. If your grandfather fought with Kim Il-sung, you were loyal class. You got privileges, education, access to power, as long as you never questioned the system. The moment you expressed doubt, you fell. And you didn't fall alone. Your parents fell. Your children fell. Your siblings, cousins, grandparents. 3 generations would be punished for your crime. This created something psychologically devastating. Even people who hated the regime became its enforcers. Because protecting your family meant reporting your neighbors. Survival meant betrayal. Love meant silence. North Korea developed a network of informants so vast that every neighborhood, every workplace, every school had someone watching. Children were taught to report parents who spoke against the regime. Spouses reported spouses. Friends reported friends. Nobody could be trusted. Everyone was complicit. And if you were accused, there was no trial, no defense, no appeal. Security forces came in the night. They took you to places that had no names. Political prison camps scattered across North Korea's mountains. Places so secret they weren't on maps, so brutal that survival rates were measured in months, not years. Entire families disappeared. One day they were your neighbors. The next day their home was empty, their existence erased from official records, their names forbidden to be spoken. It was as if they had never existed. Why didn't people rebel? Why didn't they rise up against this madness? Because rebellions require communication, coordination, belief that enough others feel the same way. In North Korea, you could never know if the person sitting next to you was a fellow sufferer or an informant. You could never organize because any gathering of more than a few people required state permission and supervision. You could never plan because your own family might turn you in to protect themselves. The mystery isn't why North Koreans didn't rebel. The mystery is how human beings survived in a society designed to destroy every shred of trust, hope, and humanity. And the deepest mystery of all, how does a system this cruel sustain itself not just for years, but for decades? By the 1970s, something impossible was happening. Kim Il-sung, now in his 60s, began preparing not to retire, not to allow elections, but to pass power to his son. This had never happened in a communist state. The Soviet Union didn't have royal succession. China didn't have royal succession. Communist ideology explicitly rejected monarchy and hereditary power. The entire point was rule by the party, by the people, by collective leadership. Kim Il-sung didn't care. He announced that his son, Kim Jong-il, would eventually lead North Korea, not as one leader among many in the party, but as the next great leader, the next son of the nation. International observers were baffled. Even China and the Soviet Union, North Korea's only allies, were suspicious. Was this still communism? Or had Kim Il-sung created the world's first communist monarchy? But here's what made it even stranger. Kim Jong-il was nothing like his father. Kim Il-sung was a military commander, a guerrilla fighter, someone who at least had revolutionary credentials, however exaggerated. Kim Jong-il was born in the Soviet Union during his father's exile. He grew up in privilege. He never fought in a war. He never struggled. He was a spoiled child of dictatorship, obsessed with movies, fine food, and imported Western luxuries while ordinary North Koreans starved. How could this man inspire loyalty? How could soldiers worship someone who had never held a gun in combat? How could starving farmers accept a leader who collected thousands of bottles of expensive cognac? The answer reveals something crucial about totalitarian succession. The successor doesn't need to be impressive. He just needs to control the story. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, North Korean propaganda began slowly shifting. Kim Jong-il was no longer just the leader's son. He became the dear leader, the genius of mankind, the mastermind behind North Korea's achievements. According to state media, Kim Jong-il composed 6 operas in 2 years. He wrote thousands of books. He invented new farming techniques. He shot 38 under par the first time he played golf, including 11 holes in one, a mathematically impossible feat that was reported as fact. The lies weren't meant to be believable. They were meant to be inescapable. And beneath the propaganda, Kim Jong-il was building something even more sinister than his father's cult of personality. He was expanding the prison camp system, tightening information control, preparing for a transition that would prove whether the Kim dynasty could survive beyond its founder. Because a dark question loomed. What happens when Kim Il-sung dies? Will the system collapse? Will people finally rebel when the founding dictator is gone? Will China or the Soviet Union intervene? Or will North Korea prove that totalitarianism, once established, can perpetuate itself forever? The answer came in 1994, and it was worse than anyone imagined. On July 8, 1994, Kim Il-sung died of a heart attack at age 82. The man who had ruled North Korea for 46 years, who had built the cult of personality from nothing, who had transformed an entire nation into his personal kingdom, was gone. The world watched. Intelligence agencies waited for collapse. South Korea prepared for potential chaos. Would there be a power struggle? Would the military seize control? Would starving citizens finally rise up now that the eternal president was dead? None of that happened. Instead, something far more disturbing occurred. North Korea mourned as if a god had died. State television showed thousands of people weeping in the streets. Not quiet crying. Hysterical, collapsing, shrieking grief. People throwing themselves on the ground. Soldiers sobbing uncontrollably. Citizens beating their chests in anguish. Foreign journalists wondered, was this genuine? Or was this performed grief, done out of fear? The truth was probably both. After nearly 50 years of propaganda, after generations of brainwashing, after decades of isolation from reality, many North Koreans genuinely believed Kim Il-sung was special. But many others wept because not weeping was dangerous, because informants were watching, because insufficient grief could mark your family as disloyal. Grief became mandatory. Grief became survival. And in that moment of manufactured mourning, Kim Jong-il consolidated absolute power. There was no vote, no transition period, no collective leadership. Kim Jong-il simply declared himself the successor. And the entire apparatus of state power, the military, the party, the secret police, accepted it without question. The first communist hereditary succession in history happened without a single shot fired in resistance. But Kim Jong-il inherited a dying nation. By the mid-1990s, North Korea was collapsing economically. The Soviet Union had dissolved in 1991, ending crucial aid. China was opening to capitalism and reducing support. North Korea's centrally planned economy was failing catastrophically. Factories closed. Electricity became sporadic. Food production collapsed. Then came the floods of 1995 and 1996. Massive rainfall destroyed crops across the country. What should have been a manageable natural disaster became a famine, not because the floods were unprecedented, but because the state had no reserves, no flexibility, no ability to respond. The government called it the Arduous March, a poetic name for mass starvation. Between 1994 and 1998, somewhere between 600,000 and 3 million North Koreans starved to death. The true number will never be known because the regime refused to admit the famine was happening, even as bodies lay in the streets, even as children's bellies swelled from malnutrition, even as people ate grass, tree bark, and anything they could digest to survive. The government's response wasn't to open borders, accept international aid without conditions, or reform the economy. Kim Jong-il's response was to accelerate the nuclear weapons program. While his people starved, he built bombs. While children died, he threatened the world. While the nation collapsed, he tightened his grip on power. This was the climax of North Korean history, the moment when it became undeniable that the Kim regime valued its own survival above everything, including the lives of millions of its own citizens.